Here is my PowerPoint on the project closing review of Mr. Wilson's backyard shed. And here is Mr. Wade Wilson himself, just coming in here and there to help us out with this. My project overview. This is the initial sketch of the shed, the 10-foot by 10-foot shed that I initially colored blue, because I thought blue would be a nice color for a shed. Project was scheduled under budget initially in case for any emergencies. The project ended under budget even with the color change on day 20, which is always nice. The actual cost of work performed is $9,700. The budgeted cost of work performed is a little more at $9,750. The cost performance index was 0.975. The scheduled performance index was 0.9698. Both of these under 1. It's fantastic. And this is the initial budget that I had put together prior to the color change. So the project end checklist. Gain client acceptance. So Mr. Wilson is very happy with the red color of the shed and happy we could accommodate the last minute color change and still be under budget, which having him be happy with it was great, especially for my first project. Transition deliverables to owner. I gave Mr. Wilson a tour of the shed and made sure he thoroughly tested the light, sink and drain, and the door and lock to make sure everything was good prior to handing the keys to him. My closeout contract obligations. I met or emailed each contractor to give them the final okay on their contract obligations, went over any notes, anything that they felt that could have been improved, anything I felt that could have been improved. I also made arrangements to make final payments as needed. Capturing my lessons learned. I think this is one of the bigger steps. As you know, on day 20, Mr. Wilson felt that the progress of the project was not up to par for what I thought it was. Quickly realized that I was not properly communicating to him the status week to week and on big development days. So as a project manager, I must communicate properly to the stakeholders the progress of the project and on the specified time frame. I initially didn't have progress reports that I was using and felt that it was necessary early on, so I just started noting what we did every day or every week or what have you, so that way when he asked me on day 20, I said, well, this is what I have that we did, so having that progress report was really beneficial to him. Updating the organization's central information repository. There really wasn't anything that we did because he didn't want any of that stuff, so I updated my information, but that was it. Issuing the final financials. Here I made arrangements with the contractors and I was given the final expectations to Mr. Wilson, so he knew what checks he needed to write and what date, so I could then deliver the final checks to the contractors myself or make sure that he paid them properly on the due date. Closing accounts and changing codes. I did have access to Mr. Wilson's account that he opened specifically for the project, but I personally didn't have the ability to change anything. So at the end of it, I aggressively suggested Mr. Wilson change these codes once all the checks to the contractors were cleared. So once all the money was used and he only had the money that was left over, the $300, then he could change all the codes. Updating source schedules. So I updated all my schedules and checklists and my reports to make sure it showed everything was completed and how it was completed. I'm conducting a performance evaluation. I found a blank performance evaluation for myself and asked Mr. Wilson to complete it as well as I completed it. Then I kind of compared what he said to what I said to make sure that we were on the same page. And all the places where he thought that I was lacking, I made sure that I knew I was lacking so that way I could make myself better in the future. Also updated my personal resume using this as the final project. To show that, you know, even though it was technically a small project, it was a big feat for me. Marketed my accomplishments, so I added my resume onto all the job platforms that I have. I also added this project to LinkedIn. I asked for referrals and references, so I received a really nice letter of recommendation from Mr. Wilson, as well as a couple letters from a couple of the contractors that we worked with. And then, yay, I celebrated. We did the shed, I finished all my reports. We still have money left over. It was awesome. So with the extra money, he threw a little party, and I got to come. So that was kind of nice, just to celebrate that he got the shed done on time, and that I was helped him to achieve this. So in my project review, the purpose of this project was to design and build a 10-foot by 10-foot shed in 1 month at $10,000. The scope, project context, and project dependencies. So we were dependent on the weather, obviously. We were dependent on the availability of the resources. And we were definitely dependent on obtaining the permit on time to build this. And then we waited and hoped that all the inspections went well and that nothing broke. That is always a big thing, because if it breaks, then you got to fix it, and then you have to have the inspector come back out and look at it, and that's always fun because inspectors will be there from 8 to 5. So my assumptions, there's adequate room for the shed and the size is large enough for the purpose. So he wants the shed to hold backyard tools so they're not in his garage. And he said 10 foot by 10 foot. And so my thought is, well, he's probably going to want more in here than just these tools, so is it going to be able to fit more? Because when people have more room, they tend to put more things in, in the space that you have. My constraints were time, space, budget, and weather. In New Mexico, we don't have a lot of rain or anything like that. It's just the wind, and that blows all the dirt around because we have so much dirt everywhere. And obviously, if you're moving dirt, that's, yeah. And then time was also a big constraint on my concern, because it seemed like this project would take more time than it actually did. I wasn't worried as much for the space. The budget I was careful on, but I knew having the right contracts with the right contractors that the budget would be a little more taken care of without heavy observation. My recommended project approach was to hire a proper contractor or contractors to complete the job on time and within budget. My success criteria and deliverables was the completed shed will meet the criteria as discussed. My project challenges: knowing where to start, how to plan and understand what and who are needing to be completed. That was kind of big, because you get a project of, I need a shed. All right, well, it seems easy. But then you look at all the pieces that need to be put together. He needed to have water, he needed to have electricity, then he needed shingles, he needed the siding, he needed, just all these different things you start writing down, you realize that this is really a lot bigger project. Then you make the schedule after you have everything written down that you need. You put together when the schedule has to be done. So when you're talking to the contractors, well, I have to be in there before these guys because of this. And then we have to come back after those guys and finish. So knowing what you need to have done is definitely key. Then the stakeholder expressed concern for the progress of the project. And this is, again, where I found that I was not communicating properly. So I decided I need to have more detailed progress reports. And even if the stakeholder doesn't want them, I'm like, just look at it. And make him look at it for 2 seconds and discuss with the stakeholder my view versus his view. So insisting that they look at the progress reports, I think, is better. And then there was the last minute color change to the exterior. That took an extra couple of days because we had to make sure the color red is what he wanted. So testing it out and making sure the red he had envisioned is the same red everybody else thought. And in my conclusion, you have to maintain constant communication with the stakeholder. Even if they don't want to look at your reports, they don't like your reports, they don't like your face, whatever. You got to tell them, this is where we're at. Are you good with that? And so that way he knows what's going on. This definitely opened my eyes to the complexity of any project. Any project is complex. I've recently put grass in my backyard and, thought of it's like, oh yeah, let's put grass. But then you think, well, I want the irrigation back there too, because I'm not going to be back there watering every day, or I'm going to forget, or it's going to be your turn and you're going to forget, and then I'm going to think, oh, he did it yesterday, I don't need to worry about it, and before you know it, the grass dies. So it's a lot to think about. Proper planning and stakeholder acceptance are definitely key. You have to make sure the plan is there, you got to follow the plan, you got to make sure the stakeholder likes the plan, and that they don't deviate unless you make notes and change it, and then update the plan. And then again, maintaining constant communication. I can't think how important communication is, seeing how on day 20, that he was not happy with the progress of it. And here, another plan. Have to have a plan. Plan and communicate. Giant, huge things. But here is the final look of what I would think the shed would look like. Obviously not with the water behind it, because there's no bodies of water like that in New Mexico that are blue. They're mostly brown, because there's not a lot of water here. But here we have now Deadpool, aka Mr. Wilson, giving us the thumbs up, so he's happy with it. Very happy with it. Here are my references, the textbook. This dustymars.net site is where I found the red shed, and they actually do make sheds, so I thought that was really awesome. And then the Google images is where I found Wade Wilson and Deadpool. And then at the end, Mr. Wilson says thank you when he's post accident chemical issues there. And this is the end, so I just want to thank you very much for taking the time to watch.